watching Property TV.
Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. My name's Stephen Galpin and this is the show where you can have all of your property related questions answered by our team of experts. Joining me today is Joanna Leggett, co-founder of Leggett Immobilier, French property experts. Joanna, hi.
Hi Stephen, nice to see you again.
And you, safe journey in, I hope.
Yes.
And on your left, Terry Everson, Director of Cornerstones Financial Services PLC, Foreign Exchange Specialists. Hi.
Nice to be here for the first time.
Good. Well, we'll try and go gently with you. So try not to catch you out on anything too difficult, but there we are. Joanna, you're going to go first with your first question. And it is this. I understand that post-Brexit, the longest I can now stay in my French holiday home is just 90 days in any one 180-day period. If in fact for any number of reasons it becomes necessary to stay longer, can I apply for an extension of time without applying for full residency?
Yes, you can. So what you would need to do, you could apply for a long stay visa. If you own a property in France, it was all a little bit tricky at first because nobody really knew what was going on and what's happening. But we have a lot of clients that have holiday homes there, and the visas are coming through quite quickly now. So if you own a property there, then yes, you can do that. If you go over 183 days, though, you become a fiscal tax resident in France. So you have to keep it under that. Otherwise, you are liable for paying tax in France if you go over that time. So the 90 days, basically, if you don't apply for a visa, then you can only stay for 90 days, and then you have to be gone for 90 days, and then you can come back for another 90 days after that period of time.
Okay.
But yeah, visas are quite easy to apply for, and if you go over the 183, then you would need a permanent residency.
I'm quite interested, the application for an extension or a residency visa, I mean, what seems to be the French attitude? I mean, they've always in the past been very sort of keen, I think, to have the investment come into France,
Yeah.
and the property ownership. Are they still of that frame of mind?
Well, we do have Macron, but
Well,
but yeah, it's
we have Boris.
yeah. It is. I mean, to be honest, there's 82 million tourists visit France every year, and they need the tourism, and they need to keep the villages open and keep the shops open, etc. Especially for Brits who tend to buy rurally or in the countryside or in some of the sort of tourist areas. So yeah, they do encourage them. But to be honest, I mean, if we look at our clients, our average age is about 50. Most of those people are working, so most people won't have 90 days holiday. They might have 5 weeks and then rent it out for the rest of the time, which is very easy to do as well. The only thing I would say is when you are applying for a visa, you have to do it before you go. Don't do it when you're in France because you won't be accepted. You have to do it through the embassy in the UK before you go.
Okay, so, but in this particular question, the question is asking if they get caught having to stay there for that extra time. Is there any way they can do it there?
No, you have to apply for the visa before you go. Otherwise, and they are stamping passports and things now, going in and out of France. And also when they screen them, they will be able to tell how long you've been there. So I would be careful. I wouldn't overstay. Or you might not get back in.
What's the consequence if you did overstay?
Well, we don't really know because it's so recent. We haven't seen any. Well, I personally haven't seen anyone that's overstayed the actual amount of time. So I think in the forthcoming year we'll find out what happens.
Find out the hard
it changes all the time, doesn't it? So
yes. Does it vary from sort of province to province?
No, it's exactly the same.
It's all the same.
Yeah, getting residency depends on the area. For example, I'm based in the Dordogne and mine came through in a month, but the people in the Charente were waiting for 6 months because there was such a backlog, but that was probably down to COVID, not so much the Brexit.
And are you finding things easier for travel sort of around the country now?
Yeah, some flights have actually stopped the routes altogether, like, for example, Bordeaux to Gatwick, with EasyJet it's now not running anymore, so you have to go to Heathrow. So there's some sort of changes there. But travel-wise, I mean, France, the roads are never really that busy in France anyway, so for driving, it's ideal. I've noticed the trains, because I generally come over on the trains, and they are a lot busier. and difficult to get seats. So I think people are using trains and driving more so than flights.
And are you wearing your mask on the train?
Yes, you have to wear your mask on every train and in the station in France, and they tell you off. And you have to have your COVID pass, and you get a little wrist receipt for that as well, because you can't travel on their TGVs without one.
I'm just so surprised in this country, although it's recommended well, I mean, in London they've made it a condition of travel that you're supposed to wear your mask, but I think there's so few people wearing. Don't you find that?
I find I come in on the central line, I'd say 50% not wearing mask, and it's having an effect on other passengers, because I think their attitude is, well, if no one else is wearing one, why should I?
It's a degenerative thing, isn't it? Yes.
I always wear mine. At my age, I have to.
Yes.
And in France, you have no choice. You have to wear a mask on any rail. So even if it's a 6-hour journey, you have to have the mask on the whole time.
Well, I think that's a good thing, and I think that's what we're probably heading for this winter as well. As the cases have gone, I think we almost hit 50,000 in the day yesterday, didn't we? So, yeah, that's it. Okay, Joanna, thank you very much. Terry, your first question on property question time. I understand that my bank is probably the easiest place to obtain euros for my transfer to France for a property transaction. Can the experts advise me of any alternatives that could save me money in rates and fees? I'm sure you can.
I certainly can. Yep. I mean, historically, clients buying properties overseas would normally use their bank. They wouldn't be aware of the alternatives. There's now a lot more alternatives. There's a lot of brokerages out there that can facilitate the transaction, the foreign exchange transaction, and the onward payment. And they tend to be more user-friendly than the banks, where you can speak to designated members of staff in compliance, finance and trading to do the transaction. Banks typically, historically, would be charging an average of 3 to 5% above the interbank rates. So if the rate is now, say, 118, bank would typically give you 114 or 115 if you're buying euros. If you're using a broker, you're going to get a lot closer to the 118 rate.
Right. And what about fees?
Now, using a broker, there's no fees. That they make their money in the exchange rate because of the volumes they're doing. They are trading at interbank themselves, so they can give much tighter rates. There's no fees at all.
Okay. Would a bank charge fees?
Typically, they would charge fees for the transfer, and they may. One of the advantages with a broker like ourselves, we can make onward payments to the destination direct. So if we're paying a solicitor or back to the client's euro account, we can do that as well.
I suppose in essence, your guys have got a sort of rather more hands-on experience than any particular bank in property transactions, I would think. Because,
yes, we have. We talk them through the transaction. They have the ability to use an online platform if they prefer that, so they can monitor the rates and do the transaction online. Most private clients in property transactions like to call the dealer, get a bit of a holding hand through the transaction and everything, and it runs very smoothly.
Yeah, I say, because I think what I found in the past is a lot of the smaller branches of banks will only refer it to a head office foreign exchange department anyway, and you get further and further away from the person that can actually help you, and that's not always helpful. Do you find transactions fairly smooth, Joanna?
Well, we always recommend to use a currency company, because it could be the saving that you'll actually make, and the rates are so much better than you get from the bank anyway. You can forward book, so you can, set your rate and hold that rate. So at the moment it's 118.60 at the moment, so you can hold that rate for your transaction, but it could be the price of a new kitchen or bathroom.
Perhaps a question to both of you really. Are we really coming out of COVID now in terms of the volume of transactions going on, both in FX and in actual purchase?
We've had the busiest year we've had in 22 years. So COVID has had, the only effect I think it's had is where people buy. I think that, we're getting a lot of the cities. I've never seen so many Parisians in the Dordogne in my life.
Right.
So they're all looking at secondary homes or commuting because it's 2 hours on the train to Paris. So a lot of the apartments are being sold in Paris, and they're buying little pied-à-terres and moving out to the country. So
it's the only problem in the country then is it's full of wretched French people, I suppose. Yeah.
the Parisians. Even the French don't like the Parisians, but, but
Right.
we do.
What about volume with you, Terry?
Yeah, we see a pullback in private client transactions during COVID, but now we've come out of that, we've seen a big increase in the last 3 months. Typically, a lot of the transactions are Spain. We're seeing more in France, specifically some of the ski resorts where people are buying chalets. Even places like Dubai, people are buying properties. So yeah, we're seeing a big upsurge in the last few months.
That's all good stuff, isn't it? That's all good news, I think. So on that basis, I think we'll take a break now. So that's all we've got time for in this half of the show. We'll be back after the break. Join me then.
You are watching Property TV. You are watching Property TV.
Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time. I'm joined by Joanna Leggett and Terry Everson, here to answer your questions on foreign exchange and buying in France. So, Joanna, your second question. Can the French property experts advise me on the new healthcare rules and entitlements now the pre-Brexit health card has finished being valid?
It's just changed. It's just got a different name. So you can still. It depends whether if you're having a holiday home, then you'd need travel insurance, holiday travel insurance.
Right.
But if you're becoming a permanent resident, then you would need to go into the healthcare system, and that's mandatory. It usually takes a process of about 3 months. So as soon as you get there, you can register your S1 form with CPAM, which is like the government place to go for Social Security. Within 3 months, you would get your Social Security number, and then you would get your carte vitale. The carte vitale entitles you to 70% of all of any healthcare coverage or operations or things like that. So you would need to get a top-up insurance for the other 30%, which is known as a mutual. And there's lots of companies and insurance companies that do that. It's a lot cheaper than it is in the UK.
Typically, what would that cost?
Well, if you were looking at Bupa or something like, you'd probably be looking at about 1,600, 2,000. I don't know. I haven't lived in England for so long.
Right.
But in France, you'd be, for example, mine is about 450 a year.
Okay.
So it's not a lot. And that covers everything. You're covered for dental, for opticians, all sorts of things.
Is that from day one?
From as soon as you take out the insurance, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think here now, if you're coming into this country, you have to pay a deposit, don't you, towards the national health before you can start claiming.
Is that for EUs?
Yeah,
or
yes.
Not for British people,
Not for
obviously.
British,
yeah,
no,
yeah.
no.
I'm not sure what it is in the UK, but I know in France. But to be honest, it's the same system for the French. So it's no different. They have to go through the same process as a British person would have to go through to make sure that they get into the system.
That's good. Are there any sort of other requirements? You've got healthcare. What about paying into a pension fund or a state pension fund, or is there anything like that?
Well, it depends whether you're employed in France or you're employed in the UK, because obviously if you're in the UK, then you'd be paying into a UK pension, and then you would have that transferred over through a currency each month, because that'll save you money as well. Yeah, all our clients do that as well. But yeah, if you're employed in France, then you'll be paying into a French pension scheme.
Okay, good. Any comments on that, Terry?
No, this is something, we have some clients do that. They make regular monthly payments for various things. It could be pensions, utilities, and we set it up as like a standing payment every month. And the client can do it online as well. So.
Is an FX company happy to do that? I mean, I'm just thinking myself. I obviously have no qualms about using an FX company to transfer the funds to buying the property. I think probably I'd worry about bothering you for transferring a few £100s a month.
All automated now, all on the platform, no human interaction. And it keeps the customer happy as well. So, you know, if in future they're going to buy another property or maybe sell the property, they'll use us as well. So.
Yeah. So they can come to you for a pretty complete service, really.
Full service, correct, yeah.
Yeah, sort of bridging bank, as it were. Yeah, I quite like that. That's pretty good. Okay, well that's...
And renovations as well. We have a lot of clients that will go through the currency for if you're getting a new roof or putting a swimming pool in or a new kitchen, it just saves you so much money using a currency broker to
Yes.
going through your bank.
Well, I can see that. I mean, I don't want to do the banks down in any way, but they are somewhat inflexible when it comes to these things, aren't they? So I think anything that eases the pain and makes life simple can only be good news. All right, Joanna, thank you for that. Terry, looking to the future, I'm hoping in the next 2 years to buy a property abroad. The one factor I can't control and therefore budget for is the exchange rate, possibly converting pounds into euros. Any advice about hedging my bets, please?
That's quite a topical question, Stephen, because today we've hit a 52-week high in the euro. We're at 118.60. So we have clients that haven't found a property, but they want to take advantage of the rate. So they can book a forward contract to lock the rate in, typically up to 2 years forward. And all they would need to do is put a deposit down against that to cover any adverse market risk. So if the client was trading up to 6 month forward, we would ask them to put 5% down of the contract. So if they was looking at a property for £1 million, they would put a £50,000 deposit down. We normally look for a bit more deposit if they go further than 6 months forward.
Well, go to the ultimate on that. What would you expect on say a 2 year forward?
Well, a 2 year forward, we would ask a client on a 2 year forward to put up 10% of the property's purchase. They can do what's known as a drawdown. So if in 3 months they found the property, they can bring the contract forward to settle it, and obviously their deposit comes off of the settled transaction.
Okay, well, it doesn't sound that expensive to me, is it, you, Joanna?
No, that's what we advise as well for clients.
And they can roll contracts. So if a client thought they're in the middle of a property purchase that's going to take place in 3 months' time, and they book the transaction now, and in 3 months' time it's not complete, they can roll the contract for another 1, 2, 3 months if they want to, with no penalties.
Especially when it's a good rate, it's always good to set that rate, because in 3 months' time, if it's dropped, you might not have enough money to complete the purchase.
Yes.
If the rate drops quite substantially.
I mean, Joanna, I mean, this is something I got involved in a little while ago with Italy. You have a vendor in a European country seeing the exchange rates fluctuate, knowing very well that perhaps you're having an advantage through this, and then they want to adjust the price of one thing or another. At what point is the price fixed in your negotiations and your transactions in France?
Well, the price, as soon as you make an offer, that's the fixed price, whether it takes 6 months to complete or a year to complete, depending on the situation. Usually they take 3 months to complete, but you can't, but you know, you're in France and it's euro, so just because you might be buying in British pounds, you can't suddenly come back 3 months later and say, well, I haven't got enough money, I'm only going to pay this amount, because it's France. So that's the fixed price. When you put that offer in, that's what you have to pay.
Okay. So I mean, the fluctuations are really very limited. If you take that option of buying forward, and as you say, anywhere up to 2 years, I mean, that can only be good news, can't it? I think?
It is. And if you're using a broker that's got an e-money licence, they can also put the full amount on deposit if they wish to do that.
Explain an e-licence.
Right. If you haven't got the e-money licence, you can't hold client funds more than 48 hours. If you've got the e-money licence, the client has a designated e-wallet account to hold the money. So if a client's got £1 million to buy a property overseas, but he hasn't found the property, he can actually, if he wants to, deposit the £1 million, so he can move very quickly, you know, when he finds the property, if he chooses to do that.
Okay, like a protected account, like a client account.
Yeah, it is a client account.
Yeah, as a solicitor would have, or a notary, or somebody like that. Okay, and how many, Joanna? How many people, you know, out of 100, what sort of percentage will use an FX broker because they want to pin the price, as opposed to just convenience, as it were?
Well, we would recommend that 100% do, because you are always going to save money, because the rates are always better with an FX currency company than the bank. But some people are just like, you know, friends with their bank manager, and they've done everything and they're stuck in their ways and they don't trust anything, and they tend to still go directly through the bank. But I mean, we would say 100% use the currency. Most of our clients do now, and there's so much information and that you can find out, and you do save money. So I would always recommend it, but I would say there's only a small percentage that still go through the bank.
Right. And how would this affect if you were borrowing in the country of purchase, if you're getting some kind of French mortgage from a French bank or something like that? They'll accept transactions from an FX broker in for the deposits and that
Yes,
sort of
yeah,
thing,
of course. It's
just in the normal way.
Yeah, just being the normal. It's basically it's as if it's coming from the bank, but it's coming from the FX company. So you'd be transferring your money to the FX company, who'd then be paying the mortgage payments into the bank in France.
And I suppose one with an e-trading license then has greater credibility, does it?
Greater credibility. The other advantage as well, I don't want to keep knocking the banks, that if you have a query on the transaction or you've got an issue, you know, banks tend to be very difficult to get an answer and a solution, whereas if you're dealing direct with a broker, with the point of contact, you'll get the solution straight away.
Okay, and just a final question on that: if you do lock in money and put a substantial deposit down, let's say over a 2-year period, presumably you can add to that deposit over the time, can you?
Yeah, you can. Well, you wouldn't need to add to the deposit unless the market movement went against your position. But if you did, say, €1 million 6 months forward, and then the property that you found was €1.5 million, you adjust the deposit accordingly.
Okay, and I suppose the sort of final point on that, if everything went wrong, as sometimes these things do, what are the sort of penalties for coming out of that kind of arrangement?
There's no penalties. What would happen, you would close the contract out. If there was a loss against the rate they put the contract on, that would come off the deposit. And if there was a profit, the client would benefit from the profit.
Okay. Well, sounds very fair, doesn't it? Yeah. So that's a good fair business. Well, thank you both for that. That's all we've got time for on this show. So join us again next time on Property Question Time. And don't forget, if you have a question for our experts, do contact us through the website www.propertytv.uk. See you next time.